Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive council chamber, trying not to let his nervousness show. The room stretched out like a cathedral, with seats arranged in circles that rose up toward the domed ceiling. Strange beings filled those seats. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of what seemed like living crystal, and a few appeared to be floating clouds of gas held together by energy fields. This was Nexus Prime, the heart of galactic civilization. Every major species in the known galaxy had representatives here. Jake had dreamed of this moment for years. Today, humanity would finally join the Galactic Council as a full member. Ambassador Morrison, came a voice that sounded like wind chimes. The translator in his ear turned it into perfect English. Please demonstrate your species' military capabilities. Jake nodded to his aide, who activated the holographic projector. A three-dimensional image appeared above Jake's head, showing a sleek human warship floating in space. The ship was smaller than most alien vessels, with clean lines and no obvious weapons visible on its hull. This is our newest destroyer. The Liberty, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. It is equipped with our primary weapon system, electromagnetic railguns. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the chamber. Several aliens made sounds that the translator couldn't convert, but Jake could guess they weren't impressed. The hologram changed, showing the inside of the ship's weapon bay. Long, smooth barrels extended along the hull, with complex magnetic coils wrapped around them. Our railguns use electromagnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to extremely high speeds, Jake explained. They fired dense tungsten slugs at velocities that would be impossible with chemical explosives. On the hologram, one of the railguns fired. A bright flash of energy lit up the weapon bay as the slug shot forward. The projectile moved so fast it was barely visible, striking a test asteroid and punching completely through it. The kinetic energy is enormous, Jake continued. A single slug can penetrate several meters of solid steel. Our newest versions can achieve speeds close to 10% of light speed. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then soft laughter began to spread through the alien assembly. It started with small chuckles and grew into what sounded like genuine amusement. Counselor Vextha, a tall being that looked like she was carved from purple crystal, raised one of her many arms. Kinetic projectiles? She asked, her voice ringing like a bell. How wonderfully primitive. Jake felt his face flush red. Primitive? These weapons can destroy any target with a direct hit. The physics alone required centuries to perfect. Oh, dear human, said another voice. This one belonged to General Mordul of the Alaketh Empire. He looked like a cross between a bear and a lobster, covered in thick armor plates. Energy shields have made such weapons useless for over 3,000 years. Watch. A new hologram appeared, showing an Alaketh warship. Bright blue energy crackled around its hull, forming a protective barrier. Plasma shields, Mordul explained. They can stop any physical projectile. Your slugs would simply bounce off like pebbles. But our velocities are much higher than anything you've faced, Jake protested. The kinetic energy levels are irrelevant, interrupted a third counselor. This one was a floating jellyfish-like creature named Zeltar. Speed means nothing against energy barriers. We learned this lesson when we were still crawling in mud puddles. Jake looked around the chamber, seeing dismissive expressions on every alien face. Even the species that looked friendly seemed to regard humanity with something like pity. Perhaps, said Vextha, her crystalline features arranging themselves into what might have been a smile. We can offer humanity associate membership, a learning period, shall we say? Associate membership? Jake's heart sank. This wasn't what they had hoped for. What does that mean exactly? Limited privileges, Mordul explained. You may maintain a small defense fleet within your home system, trading rights with council species but only under supervision. And of course, no expansion beyond your current territory without council approval. Jake wanted to argue, but he knew it was hopeless. The aliens had already made up their minds. Humanity was too primitive, too backwards to be taken seriously. I must protest, he said anyway. Humanity has proven itself capable of remarkable innovation. Given time, we could contribute significantly to the council's goals. Of course, Zeltar's voice bubbled with what sounded like condescension. All species believe they are special. Perhaps in a few centuries, when you have developed proper energy weapons and shield technology, we can revisit this discussion. The vote is called, announced Vextha. All in favor of granting humanity associate membership? Hands, claws, tentacles, and stranger appendages rose throughout the chamber. Jake counted them quickly. Nearly unanimous. Any opposed? Only 3 beings raised their arms. Jake recognized one as Ambassador Kriva of the Thalan Republic, a species that had always been friendly to humans. The motion passes, Vextha declared. Humanity is granted associate membership in the Galactic Council, with all the limitations therein. Ambassador Morrison, welcome to the community of civilized species. The ceremony continued for another hour, with various officials explaining humanity's new status and restrictions. Jake listened with growing frustration. They were being treated like children, given toys to play with while the adults discussed important matters. When it was finally over, Jake found himself alone in the viewing lounge outside the council chamber. Through the massive windows, he could see the stars stretching into infinity. Somewhere out there was Earth, home to 8 billion people who were counting on him to secure their future among the stars. His communication device chimed. Admiral Lisa Kane's face appeared on the small screen. How did it go? She asked, though Jake's expression probably told her everything she needed to know. Associate membership, Jake said. They think our weapons are primitive toys. Apparently, energy shields make kinetic weapons obsolete. Kane was quiet for a moment. Behind her, Jake could see the bridge of her flagship, the Defiant. Officers moved efficiently between stations, maintaining humanity's most advanced warship. Maybe they're right, Kane said finally. Maybe railguns are outdated. Maybe, Jake agreed. But I can't shake the feeling that they're missing something important. Kane smiled slightly. You know what I always say, Jake? The enemy's greatest weakness is often their absolute certainty about their own strength. After the call ended, Jake remained at the window, staring out at the stars. The aliens thought they knew everything about warfare, about technology, about what made a species worthy of respect. Perhaps it was time to prove them wrong. 6 months had passed since humanity's disappointing welcome to the Galactic Council. Jake Morrison sat in his cramped office aboard Nexus Prime, reviewing intelligence reports that made his blood run cold. The Korthak Dominion was on the move. Jake spread the holographic displays across his desk, watching red arrows advance across star maps. The Korthak were a warrior species, feared throughout the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency and overwhelming firepower. Their ships were massive things, bristling with plasma cannons and protected by shields that could withstand direct hits from supernovas. For the past month, they had been conquering neutral systems near human space. 3 colonies had already fallen, their populations either enslaved or scattered. The pattern was clear. The Korthak were building toward something big. His communication panel chimed. President Carter Webb's weathered face appeared on the screen, looking tired and worried. Jake, we're getting reports of Korthak scouts in the outer system, Webb said without preamble. Captain Foster intercepted one near Jupiter. The alien commander seemed amused by our presence. Jake pulled up the encounter report. Captain Ryan Foster commanded the Defiant, one of Earth's newest destroyers. The ship was sleek and fast, equipped with the latest generation of railguns that Dr. Amy Chen's team had developed. According to Foster's report, the Korthak scout ship had been massive, easily 3 times the size of the Defiant. When Foster had demanded the alien vessel identify itself, the response had been mocking laughter. Your primitive species should surrender now. The Korthak captain, war leader Grixka, had transmitted. We have conquered 47 systems. Your single world will fall in a single day. Foster had responded by demonstrating the Defiant's weapons on a nearby asteroid. The railgun slug had punched clean through the space rock, shattering it into thousands of pieces. Grixka had watched the display with what seemed like mild interest. Kinetic toys, the alien had said dismissively. Your crude projectiles cannot penetrate our shields, human. We have technology beyond your primitive understanding. The scout ship had then simply jumped away, leaving Foster and his crew feeling helpless and outmatched. Jake closed the report and leaned back in his chair. He had tried to appeal to the Galactic Council for protection, but the response had been predictably useless. The Korthak are a council member species, Councillor Vextha had explained, her crystal face showing no emotion. If they wish to expand into neutral territory, that is their right. Humanity should perhaps consider voluntary integration into their empire. It would be less painful than resistance, less painful. Jake had wanted to punch something, but diplomatic protocol prevented such displays of emotion. Now intelligence suggested the Korthak were massing a full invasion fleet just beyond the edge of human space, over 200 warships including their most powerful dreadnoughts. Against them, humanity could field maybe 40 ships, and even their newest vessels were considered primitive by galactic standards. Jake's thoughts were interrupted by another communication. This time it was Dr. Amy Chen, calling from her laboratory complex on Mars. "Jake, I think we might have something," she said, excitement evident in her voice despite the poor connection. "My team has been working on modifications to the railgun system. We've discovered some interesting physics." "What kind of physics?" Jake asked, though he suspected he wouldn't understand most of the explanation. "It has to do with velocity and temporal displacement," Chen said, her eyes bright with discovery. "When we push the projectiles beyond 90% of light speed, something strange happens. They start existing in a different time frame than their surroundings." Jake frowned. "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning they might be able to phase through energy barriers," Chen explained. "The shields that protect alien ships are designed to stop energy and matter moving at normal speeds. But if something is moving fast enough, it might exist in a different temporal reference frame entirely." "Are you saying our weapons might actually be effective against their shields?" Chen hesitated. "It's possible. The mathematics are complex, but the theory is sound. We just need to test it." Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency broadcasts flooded the communication channels. The Korthak fleet had been detected at the edge of human space, and they were advancing toward Earth. Jake quickly contacted President Webb and Admiral Kane. Within hours, humanity's small fleet was mobilizing for what seemed like an impossible defense. Every available ship was recalled to the Sol system. Captain Foster found himself commanding a small squadron that included the Liberty and the Retribution, captained by Steve Martinez. Their mission was to delay the enemy advance while the main fleet prepared Earth's defenses. As Foster's ships approached the edge of the solar system, the Korthak fleet came into view. It was a sight that would have terrified any sane person. Hundreds of massive warships stretched across space like a dark cloud. Each vessel was larger than anything humanity had ever built, covered in weapon emplacements and crackling with energy shields. At the center of the formation was the largest ship Foster had ever seen. It had to be at least 5 kilometers long, bristling with enough firepower to sterilize a planet. According to intelligence reports, this was the Bone Crusher, flagship of war leader Grixka himself. Foster opened a communication channel. "This is Captain Ryan Foster of the Earth Defense Force. You are entering human territory without permission. Turn back now." The response came almost immediately. Grixka's ugly face filled Foster's screen, showing rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a grin. "Captain Foster," the alien said, his voice like grinding stone. "How brave of you to face me with your tiny ships. I remember you from our previous encounter. Still playing with your kinetic toys?" "These toys might surprise you," Foster replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Grixka laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I think not, human. But please demonstrate your weapons. Show the galaxy how pathetic your species truly is." Foster looked at his weapons officer, Lieutenant Ben Clark. The young man nodded grimly and powered up the ship's railguns. "All ships, prepare to fire on my command," Foster ordered. "Let's show them what human engineering can do." The Korthak fleet continued its advance, shields glowing with barely contained energy. War leader Grixka selected his most powerful dreadnought, the World Ender, to make an example of the human ships. As the massive alien vessel moved forward, its shields flared to full power. The energy barrier around it was so bright it hurt to look at directly. Foster took a deep breath. Dr. Chen's theories were about to be put to the ultimate test. "Fire," he ordered. Dr. Amy Chen hadn't slept in 3 days. Her laboratory on Mars buzzed with activity as her team worked frantically to complete the railgun modifications. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the red planet's barren landscape stretching to the horizon, but her mind was focused on equations that could save humanity. "The velocity calculations are confirmed," called out Dr. Rick Barnes, her lead physicist. "We can achieve 97% of light speed with the new magnetic coil configuration." Amy nodded, her eyes burning from staring at holographic displays. The math was incredibly complex, but the principle was surprisingly simple. When an object moved fast enough, it began to exist in a different time frame than everything around it. Energy shields were designed to track and stop projectiles, but they had upper limits on their reaction speed. "What about the structural integrity of the projectiles?" asked Dr. Lisa Park, the materials engineer. "Tungsten can handle the acceleration, but at these speeds, even hitting a dust particle could destroy them. That's the beauty of it," Amy explained, manipulating the holographic model floating above her desk. "Once the slug reaches these velocities, it exists in a quantum superposition. It's both there and not there simultaneously. Small particles can't interact with it." The door to the laboratory slid open and Admiral Kane stepped inside. The Admiral looked tired and worried, but she tried to hide it behind her professional demeanor. "How much time do you need?" Kane asked without preamble. Amy checked her chronometer. 6 hours to complete the modifications on the test platform. Another 12 hours to upgrade the fleet's weapon systems. "We don't have 12 hours, Kane said grimly. "The Korthak fleet is already moving into the outer system. Captain Foster is engaging their advanced scouts as we speak." Through the communication system, they could hear updates from the front lines. Foster's small squadron was playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse with Korthak patrol ships, trying to buy time for the main fleet to prepare. "Admiral," came Foster's voice over the comm, crackling with interference. "I'm looking at over 200 enemy vessels. Their smallest ship is twice the size of our largest. We're going to need a miracle here." Amy felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. 8 billion people were counting on her work. If her theories were wrong, humanity would face extinction or slavery under alien masters. "I can have the first modified weapons ready in 4 hours, she said, "but we'll only be able to upgrade a few ships initially." Kane nodded. "Do it. I'll coordinate with Captain Martinez and Captain Helen Murphy. We'll create a defensive perimeter around Earth and Mars." As Kane left to coordinate the defense, Amy turned back to her team. "All right, people. We're going to prove that human ingenuity can overcome alien arrogance. Let's make history." Meanwhile, in space near Jupiter, Captain Foster was getting his first close look at Korthak technology. The alien ships were impressive in a terrifying way. Their hulls were dark and angular, covered in weapon ports that glowed with barely contained energy. The shields around them shimmered like heat waves, distorting the starlight behind them. His communications officer, Lieutenant Kate Phillips, looked up from her console with a grim expression. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the enemy fleet. They're preparing for something big." Foster studied the tactical display. The Korthak formation was spreading out, positioning themselves to surround the inner system. It was a classic invasion pattern, overwhelming force applied simultaneously from multiple directions. "Any word from Dr. Chen's team?" Foster asked. "Still working, sir," Phillips replied. "Admiral Kane says to hold our position and avoid direct engagement until the new weapons are ready." That was easier said than done. War leader Grixka seemed determined to test human defenses before the main assault began. His flagship, the Bone Crusher, had moved to the center of the formation, its massive bulk bristling with enough firepower to crack a moon. Foster's tactical officer, Commander Ben Clark, highlighted several enemy vessels on the display. "Sir, these 3 ships are moving to intercept us. They're smaller than the main battle group, but still twice our size." "Understood," Foster replied. "All ships maintain defensive formation. Let's see what these aliens are really made of." The first Korthak vessel to approach was a sleek Predator-class cruiser. Its captain transmitted on an open channel, speaking in the harsh guttural language of his species. The universal translator converted his words into cold mechanical English. "Human vessel, you are outmatched. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." Foster almost laughed at the alien's confidence. "This is Captain Ryan Foster of the Defiant. We don't surrender to bullies. If you want a fight, you'll get one." The Korthak ship responded by firing a warning shot. A beam of superheated plasma streaked past the Defiant's bow, close enough that the heat sensors registered the near miss. "That was just a taste," the alien captain said. "Our next shot will not miss." Foster looked at his crew. They were young, most of them, but they had trained for this moment their entire careers. Even if they couldn't win, they could show the galaxy that humans didn't go down without a fight. "All ships prepare to engage," Foster ordered. "Standard railgun configuration. Let's give them something to remember." Back on Mars, Dr. Chen was making final adjustments to the first modified railgun. The weapon looked almost identical to the standard version. But the magnetic coils had been completely redesigned. Instead of the usual copper windings, she had used a new superconducting material that could generate magnetic fields strong enough to tear apart ordinary matter. Power levels are stable, reported Dr. Barnes. Magnetic field coherence is holding at 98%. Amy watched the readouts carefully. Everything had to be perfect. At the velocities they were attempting, even the smallest miscalculation could result in catastrophic failure. Load the test projectile, she ordered. The tungsten slug was loaded into the firing chamber. It looked ordinary enough, just a dense metal cylinder about the size of a coffee cup. But this particular slug would soon be moving faster than any human-made object in history. Charging sequence initiated, called out Dr. Park. Field generators at 20%, 40%, 60%. The weapon began to hum with barely contained energy. Amy could feel the vibrations through the floor of the laboratory. Outside, the red Martian sky flickered as the massive power draw affected the colony's electrical grid. 80%, 90%. Maximum charge achieved. Amy took a deep breath. Fire! The railgun discharged with a sound like thunder. For a split second, the entire laboratory was filled with brilliant white light. When Amy's vision cleared, she looked at the target range display. The test slug had not only penetrated the target, it had passed completely through it without slowing down. The projectile had exited the far side of the range and was now somewhere in the Martian desert, probably buried several kilometers underground. Velocity reading? Amy asked, hardly daring to hope. Dr. Barnes stared at his instruments in amazement. 97.3% of light speed, he announced. The projectile achieved temporal displacement just as predicted. Amy felt a surge of triumph, but there was no time to celebrate. Every minute they delayed, the Korthak fleet moved closer to Earth. Begin installation on the fleet immediately, she ordered. Priority goes to the Defiant and any ship that can reach the front lines within the next 2 hours. As her team rushed to prepare the upgrade packages, Amy opened a communication channel to Admiral Kane. Admiral, the modifications are ready, but I need to warn you. We'll only get one chance to surprise them. Once the Korthak understand what our weapons can do, they'll adapt their tactics. Kane's image flickered on the screen. Behind her, Amy could see the bridge of the flagship Retribution with officers rushing between stations as they prepared for battle. Understood, Doctor. How many ships can you upgrade before the shooting starts? Amy did quick calculations in her head. 5, maybe 6 if we rush. It's not much against 200 enemy vessels. It'll have to be enough, Kane replied grimly. Captain Foster is already engaging their scouts. The main battle will begin within hours. As if summoned by her words, Foster's voice crackled over the communication system. All ships, incoming plasma torpedoes! Evasive maneuvers! Amy watched the tactical display with growing dread as the first shots of the war were fired. Humanity's fate now rested on her untested theories and the courage of a handful of ship captains facing impossible odds. The galaxy was about to discover that underestimating human innovation was a fatal mistake. The space around Jupiter had become a deadly battlefield. Captain Foster watched from the bridge of the Defiant as 3 Korthak cruisers closed in on his small squadron. Their hulls gleamed with dark metal and energy crackled around them like caged lightning. Captain, we're receiving the weapon upgrades now, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Ben Clark. Dr. Chen's team is working as fast as they can, but the installation will take another 20 minutes. 20 minutes they didn't have. The lead Korthak ship, a massive Predator-class cruiser, was already charging its main weapons. Foster could see the energy building up in the alien vessel's gun ports, glowing brighter with each passing second. All ships, evasive pattern Delta, Foster ordered. Keep moving and try to buy us some time. The human ships scattered, their engines flaring as they tried to avoid the incoming plasma barrage. The first volley lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. Beams of superheated energy streaked past the Defiant, close enough that Foster could feel the heat through the ship's hull. Captain Steve Martinez, commanding the Retribution, was having similar problems. His ship shook under near misses from 2 Korthak destroyers that had moved to flank his position. Foster, how long until those upgrades are ready? Martinez called over the comm. We can't keep dodging forever. Before Foster could answer, the largest Korthak ship in the group opened fire with everything it had. The alien vessel unleashed a concentrated burst of plasma that would have vaporized any human ship caught in its path. Foster threw the Defiant into a desperate spin, barely avoiding the lethal energy beam. "Upgrade complete on Railgun Systems 1 through 4, announced Clark. "Dr. Chen's modifications are online." Foster looked at the tactical display. The 3 Korthak ships had formed a triangle around his squadron, their shields glowing with protective energy. Any normal weapon would bounce off those barriers like pebbles thrown at a wall, but these weren't normal weapons anymore. "All ships target the lead cruiser," Foster commanded. "Let's see if Dr. Chen's theories actually work." War leader Grixka, watching from his flagship several million kilometers away, was growing impatient with his subordinates. The human ships were small and fast, but they should have been destroyed by now. "Why are these insects still alive?" he demanded of his fleet commander. "Send the World Ender to finish them." The World Ender was Grixka's most powerful dreadnought, a ship so massive it could be seen with the naked eye from thousands of kilometers away. Its shields were strong enough to withstand direct hits from stellar plasma, and its weapons could crack the crust of a planet. As the gigantic vessel moved toward the battle, Grixka decided to make a public demonstration. He opened communication channels to every ship in both fleets, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach across the galaxy. "Let all species witness the fate of those who oppose the Korthak Dominion," he announced. "These pathetic humans with their primitive weapons will be crushed like insects." On the bridge of the Defiant, Foster watched the approaching dreadnought with a mixture of fear and determination. The alien ship was so large it blocked out the stars behind it. Its hull bristled with weapon emplacements, and its shields created a shimmering barrier that distorted the space around it. "Sir, that thing is 3 times bigger than our biggest ship," said Commander Kate Phillips, his communications officer. "Its shields alone probably have more power than our entire fleet." Foster nodded grimly. "Maybe so, but we're about to find out if size really matters." The World Ender moved into firing position, its massive plasma cannon swiveling to target the human ships. Energy readings spiked across all sensors as the alien vessel prepared to demonstrate its overwhelming power. "All human ships, prepare to fire," Foster ordered. His voice was steady despite the fear he felt. "Target the World Ender, everything we've got." On the Retribution, Captain Martinez shook his head in disbelief. "Foster, are you insane? That thing will swat us like flies." "Trust me, Steve, Dr. Chen knows what she's doing." The Defiant's railguns swiveled to target the massive alien dreadnought. The weapons looked almost pathetic compared to the enemy's plasma cannons, like arrows aimed at a tank. Around the ship, magnetic coils hummed with barely contained energy as the new systems powered up. "Weapons charged and ready," reported Clark. "Temporal displacement fields are stable." Foster took a deep breath. 8 billion humans were counting on this moment. "Fire!" The Defiant's railguns discharged with brilliant flashes of electromagnetic energy. To everyone watching, including most of Foster's own crew, it looked like the tungsten slugs simply vanished when they hit the alien shields. The projectiles seemed to disappear into the shimmering energy barrier, without any visible effect. Grixka laughed over the open communication channel. "Did you see that, Galaxy? The humans fire their toys and nothing happens. Our shields are absolute." On the World Ender's bridge, alien crew members were laughing and pointing at the tactical displays. Their shield generators showed no damage, no energy drain, nothing to indicate the human weapons had any effect at all. "Pathetic," muttered the ship's captain. "Charge the main cannon. Let us show them real power." But then something impossible happened. Deep inside the World Ender, alarms began to sound. Damage reports flooded the command center, as explosions cascaded through the ship's interior. The tungsten slugs, moving at 97% of light speed, had passed through the shields as if they didn't exist. The projectiles had continued through the ship's armor, reactor core, and critical systems before exiting out the other side. The massive dreadnought shuddered as internal explosions tore it apart from within. Its shields flickered and died as power systems failed. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as ammunition stores detonated. "Impossible," Grixka screamed over the communication channel. "Shields are absolute. Nothing can penetrate our barriers." But his most powerful ship was breaking apart before his eyes. The World Ender split into 3 sections, its massive hull twisted and burning. Escape pods launched from the dying vessel as its crew abandoned ship. The battlefield fell silent. Every Korthak ship stopped firing, their crews staring in shock at the destruction of what had been considered an invincible warship. Foster felt his heart racing as he watched the enemy dreadnought become a debris field. Dr. Chen's theories had worked perfectly. The railgun slugs had moved so fast they existed in a different time frame than the shield generators. The energy barriers simply couldn't react quickly enough to stop them. "All ships," Foster said over the fleet communication system, his voice carrying new confidence, "target their command vessels. Show them that human weapons are far from primitive." Captain Martinez was the first to recover from his shock. "You heard the man. All ships, open fire." Across the solar system, 37 human ships opened fire simultaneously. Their railguns, now upgraded with Dr. Chen's modifications, sent streams of tungsten slugs racing toward the Korthak fleet at velocities that challenged the laws of physics. The aliens watched in growing horror as their ships began to explode one by one. Energy shields that had protected them for thousands of years offered no defense against projectiles moving in temporal displacement. The slugs passed through the barriers like ghosts, then became solid again inside the ship's hulls. "Retreat," Grixka ordered, his voice cracking with panic. "All ships, jump to hyperspace immediately." But it was too late for most of his fleet. The human weapons were systematically destroying every Korthak vessel within range. Ships that had conquered dozens of star systems were being torn apart by what they had dismissed as primitive kinetic toys. Captain Helen Murphy, commanding the Vengeance, watched her targeting computer track another enemy cruiser. "This is for underestimating humanity," she said as she fired. The alien ship exploded in a ball of plasma as the tungsten slugs ripped through its reactor core. Within minutes, the 200-ship invasion fleet was reduced to scattered wreckage and fleeing survivors. The space around Jupiter was filled with the debris of alien warships, their hulls twisted and burning. Grixka's own flagship, the Bone Crusher, took 3 direct hits from the Defiant's railguns. The massive vessel shuddered and began to list as critical systems failed throughout the ship. Emergency alarms wailed as the crew struggled to contain the damage. "War leader, we must abandon ship," his tactical officer reported. "Hull breaches on 17 decks. Reactor containment is failing." Grixka stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His mighty fleet, the terror of the galaxy, had been destroyed by a handful of human ships using weapons that everyone knew were obsolete. As he climbed into an escape pod, the proud alien commander transmitted one final message to the human fleet. "This is impossible," he said, his voice filled with shock and defeat. "Your weapons, they cannot work. Physics forbids it." Foster's reply was calm and steady. "Maybe you should study human physics, war leader. We tend to push things beyond what others think is possible." The escape pod ejected from the dying flagship just as the ship's reactor finally gave up. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, marking the end of the Korthak invasion and the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. News of humanity's impossible victory would spread across the galaxy within hours, and nothing would ever be the same again. The news traveled faster than light across the galaxy. Within hours of the battle near Jupiter, every civilized world had heard the impossible story. The Korthak Dominion, conquerors of 47 star systems, had been utterly destroyed by a handful of human ships using primitive kinetic weapons. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council chambers erupted in chaos. Counselor Vexta stood at her crystalline podium, her usually calm demeanor shattered as reports flooded in from across known space. Her aide, a nervous Zenthari junior diplomat, whispered urgent updates in her ear. "Confirmed, Counselor," the aide said. 212 Korthak vessels destroyed. Only 18 ships escaped to hyperspace. War leader Grixka is missing and presumed dead. The chamber buzzed with the sounds of dozens of alien languages as representatives tried to process the information. General Mordul of the Alaketh Empire was frantically consulting with his military advisors, their armored forms huddled around tactical displays. "This is impossible," Mordul declared, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Energy shields are absolute barriers. No kinetic weapon can penetrate them. We have proven this countless times over thousands of years." Counselor Zeltar, the jellyfish-like being who had so casually dismissed humanity months earlier, floated near the center of the room. His translucent body was flickering with agitated colors. Perhaps the humans discovered some new form of energy weapon, he suggested weakly, something disguised to look like kinetic projectiles. Before anyone could respond, a holographic transmission activated in the center of the chamber. Admiral Lisa Kane appeared, standing on the bridge of her flagship with the debris of the Korthak fleet visible through the viewports behind her. "Honorable counselors," Kane said, her voice calm and professional, despite the historic nature of the moment. "I bring greetings from humanity and a full report on our defensive action against the Korthak invasion." Vextha found her voice first. "Admiral Kane, we demand an explanation. Our scientific understanding says what you accomplished is impossible. What weapons did you really use?" Kane smiled slightly. "The same weapons we demonstrated to you 6 months ago, Counselor. Electromagnetic railguns firing tungsten projectiles. The only difference is that we improved the velocity." "Improved how much?" demanded Mortal. 97.3% of light speed," Kane replied casually. "It required some creative engineering, but humans have always been good at pushing technology beyond theoretical limits." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Amy Chen appeared beside Kane in the hologram, her tired face brightening with scientific enthusiasm. "The physics are actually quite elegant," Chen explained. "When a projectile reaches velocities approaching light speed, it begins to exist in a different temporal reference frame. Your shield generators, no matter how advanced, simply cannot react quickly enough to intercept objects moving in temporal displacement." "But that's..." Zeltar began, then stopped. His body was now flickering rapidly between different colors as he processed the information. "Impossible?" Chen finished with a slight smile. "That's what we thought too. But sometimes the impossible is just something nobody has tried yet." Vextha stepped forward, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights in complex patterns. "You're saying that while we perfected energy weapons and defensive shields, you concentrated on one supposedly obsolete technology and pushed it beyond all known limits?" "Exactly," Kane confirmed. "While the galaxy moved toward increasingly complex solutions, we focused on making simple kinetic energy as efficient as possible. Turns out there's still plenty of room for improvement in primitive technology." General Mordol was studying his tactical displays with growing alarm. "Admiral, what you've accomplished changes everything. Every ship in the galaxy is now vulnerable to your weapons." "Not just ships," added Dr. Chen. "Space stations, planetary defenses, even those massive fortress worlds the hegemony is so proud of. When you can put a projectile anywhere in space at 97% of light speed, traditional defenses become irrelevant." The political implications hit the Council like a shockwave. For thousands of years, galactic civilization had been built on the assumption that energy shields made kinetic weapons useless. Military strategies, trade agreements, territorial boundaries, everything was based on that fundamental. Principal Ambassador Jake Morrison appeared in the hologram beside Kane and Chen. He looked tired, but satisfied as he addressed the Council that had so casually dismissed humanity just months before. "Honorable Counselors," he said formally, "humanity requests a revision of our membership status in the Galactic Council. Recent events suggest that our associate status may no longer be appropriate." Vextha looked around the chamber at her fellow counselors. The usual certainty and arrogance were gone, replaced by uncertainty and more than a little fear. Humanity had just proven that everything they thought they knew about warfare was wrong. "What do you propose?" she asked hesitantly. Jake straightened his shoulders. "Full membership with voting rights, recognition of human territorial claims in the outer spiral, and most importantly, establishment of mutual defense treaties with any species that desires protection from aggressive neighbors." The last point sent another shockwave through the chamber. Every species present understood the implication. Humanity was offering to share their revolutionary weapon technology with allies while keeping it from potential enemies. "This is extortion," declared Counselor Thexva of the Rigel Syndicate, his metallic voice ringing with indignation. "This is reality," Jake replied calmly. "The galaxy has changed. Humanity is offering partnership and mutual protection. The alternative is that every species develops their own temporal displacement weapons, which would probably take most of you several decades." Behind the scenes, frantic communications were already taking place between the various alien governments. Military analysts were scrambling to understand the new technology, while politicians tried to position their species advantageously in the new galactic order. Captain Ryan Foster, newly promoted to admiral, was leading humanity's expanded patrol fleet through former Korthak territory. The conquered worlds were being liberated one by one, their populations grateful to be free from alien oppression. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zenthari home fleet," reported his communications officer. "They're requesting a meeting to discuss defensive cooperation." Foster nodded. The Zenthari had been among humanity's harshest critics, but news of the railgun technology had changed their attitude dramatically. Similar requests were coming in from dozens of species across the galaxy. "Set up the meeting," Foster ordered, "but make sure they understand we're not giving away our technology for free. Partnership requires trust, and trust has to be earned. On Earth, President Carter Webb addressed a joint session of Congress, updating them on humanity's rapidly changing position in galactic affairs. 6 months ago, we were barely tolerated as primitive newcomers, Webb said. Today we are potentially the most powerful military force in the galaxy. But with that power comes responsibility. We must use our advantage wisely. Dr. Chen, now heading the newly established Department of Advanced Kinetic Research, was already working on the next generation of improvements. Her team had discovered that by modifying the projectile composition and magnetic field configuration, they could achieve even higher velocities. 99.2% of light speed, she reported to Admiral Kane during their weekly briefing. At that velocity, the projectiles start exhibiting quantum tunneling effects. They can literally pass through solid matter without interaction until they reach their designated target. Kane shook her head in amazement. "Dr. Chen, you've revolutionized warfare across the entire galaxy. Every species will be scrambling to develop similar technology." "Let them try," Chen replied with quiet confidence. "They're starting from scratch while we have years of experience. By the time they master basic temporal displacement, we'll have moved on to quantum tunneling, dimensional shifting, and technologies we haven't even imagined yet." The final council session to vote on humanity's new status was unlike any in galactic history. Representatives who had once dismissed humans as primitive now spoke of them with respect and more than a little fear. "The vote is called," announced Vextha. "All in favor of granting humanity full membership status with all associated rights and privileges?" This time, every hand, claw, tentacle, and appendage in the chamber rose in unanimous agreement. As Jake Morrison stood to accept humanity's new position, he couldn't help but remember the arrogance and dismissal they had faced just months earlier. The aliens had learned a hard lesson about underestimating human innovation. "Thank you, counselors," he said formally. "Humanity looks forward to a long and prosperous relationship with all member species. We hope this experience has taught everyone an important lesson about the dangers of assumptions." Later, as Jake stood in his expanded office overlooking the busy diplomatic quarter of Nexus Prime, Admiral Kane joined him at the window. "So what's next?" Kane asked. "We've got the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, full council membership, and half the known species requesting protection treaties." Jake smiled as he watched alien diplomats hurrying between meetings, all